Thousands of stars you see when you look up at the night sky, every one of them living in between two collapses. An initial collapse of a dark stellar gas cloud to form the star, and a final collapse of a luminous star on the way to ultimate fate.
Hey, good morning. Hey, did you guys by chance catch the speech by Janet Yellen? I was listening to it this morning as I was catching the stock prices, and I'm sitting watching watching this certain stock that I invest in, which is still going up. But there's usually a pattern. You know, it goes up. The high is usually a specific percentage every day. The low, when it goes down, the low is usually a specific percentage, or roughly a specific percentage. So what I've seen is every stock has its patterns. And over the past several months, what I saw also is that there's certain news that causes stock to go up. It's like, I live in a reactive world. You know, nothing happens unless it's reacting to something else. And stock is the same way. It can stay on an even kill, have an average high and an average low, and it'll meet that, you know, every day and close at a certain percentage. And then all of a sudden, someone speaks and the stock skyrockets. So far, the stock that I watch, it increased 178 points today. That's insane. It's a 13.5% increase in the price. You know, and this was at noon. So 9:30, 10:30, 11:30. So you're talking in a 2.5 hour period. I watched this stock price rise 13.5%. And as Janet Yellen speaks, the price goes up and up. And I'm trying to equate what she's saying with how does this pertain to this stock price? And the truth of the matter is, it really doesn't. The stock that I'm invested in, you know, their stock price plummeted a couple of years ago because they merged with another company, and that merger they paid cash for. So they've been cash strapped for the past, say, 3 years. Their sales revenue are not decreasing. It's just that they were carrying so much debt on their books that there was no profit at the end. And as a result, their stock went down. Now, how does what Janet Yellen have to say today make a bit of difference in the functioning of this business? It didn't. It doesn't. The truth of the matter is that company last month had to sell off some of its debt. In other words, refinance. Find somebody willing to buy it and start their loan term over, you know, and pay it off, because they just had too high of a payments. It was eating up any gross sales profits that they were seeing. So this is how they refied their debt. They also they also struck a deal with Apple at the end of last month. I think it was Apple that was going to be buying a fleet of their cars or something like that. But overall, Janet Yellen, I jotted down some of the things that she said, and listening to her, watching my stock price, I had quite a few epiphanies, or what I call aha moments. And this is what I wrote, and I wanted to share it with you guys. Listening to Janet Yellen this morning, I came to recognize, while watching the stock price move up over $1, that the financial system that she is a part of revolves around her and her board. She spoke about reducing the Fed's balance sheet while earning 2% on their investment. Now, she didn't specifically say this, I'm paraphrasing. She refers to the 2% as inflation. She doesn't refer to it as profit. But if you guys remember that the financial crisis that the legislators and the financial institutions created, when it all bust, the Federal Reserve began to buy up all these mortgage-backed securities that were high risk and a lot of junk. When Janet Yellen talks about inflation, what she's saying is we're trying to situate the economy so we can earn 2% profit off of all that crap we bought. And they're coming in under the 2%. We see inflation in food, in utility service, in rent, or our daily living expenses. We can see the inflation kicking in. And that inflation doesn't matter to her. This entity is holding a crap load of these mortgage-backed securities. And what they want is 2% inflation, or i.e. profits. They're looking for a 2% return. Now, she stated that there was no intent to lower the balance sheet to previous balances. Okay, so before the financial crisis, they had billions of dollars on their balance sheets. What they want to do is get rid of all the mortgage-backed securities and hopefully make a 2% return on those. And then they would reinvest the 2%, which would actually increase their balance sheet. Okay? And I just wanted to let you guys know, we're talking $1 trillion in mortgage-backed securities. So if they make 2% profit off of that, you're talking $20 billion of profit for the 2008-2009 legislation. For the legislation that was passed in 2008 and 2009, after they created a financial crisis. So this is why food and everyday essentials are not included in the inflation rate. To these people, these daily living expenses are pennies, and they don't count their pennies. Okay? On our balance sheets, on our expense sheet, they show up as hundreds and thousands, right? But on their balance sheets, which are so large that they're actually in the cent column, they're pennies, guys. They don't. Okay, one of these senators or whoever it was had asked her a question about household debt increasing. And she says, and I'm paraphrasing, that the household debt is not a flashing red concern for her.
But overall, I wouldn't point to household debt as something that is, flashing red on a financial stability concern.
Thank you, Chair.
It's not a concern. And like I explained, it's pennies to them, guys. It's pennies. It shows up in the pennies column. When you're dealing in billions and trillions, $200, $300 power bill, going from $100 to $250, $250 a week in groceries, having your rent go up. These things do not affect these people. So they're not included in all of these financial reports because it doesn't matter to them. It does not pertain to their life. And that's why I'm saying, we hear people like Peter Schiff and others that contradict what Yellen says about the economy, or they criticize her saying she doesn't have a clue.
And they don't like fighting deflation. The last thing the Fed wants to do is fight inflation, because fighting inflation is unpopular, right? You got to take the punch bowl away. When you're fighting the so-called deflation, you get to spike the punch bowl. You get to be the life of the party, right? When the Fed has to fight inflation, they have to start jacking up interest rates. That means they have to make the stock market go down. That means they have to make the real estate market go down. They have to make the bond market go down. Nobody likes the Fed that is jacking up interest rates. You think Paul Volcker was popular when he was jacking up interest rates? That they were burning him in effigy. I mean, he was everybody's whipping boy. Not only that, I mean, it's not just taking away the punch bowl. I mean, this is going to be this massive hangover when the alcohol stops flowing. Because if Yellen has to fight inflation, not only is she going to crash the financial markets, she's going to create another financial crisis. She's going to force the government to have to slash government spending, right? They're going to have massive reductions in entitlement spending. The government might even have to default on the national debt. So all these bad things are going to happen.
But she does have a clue. She's speaking of the things that she sees on their financial reports that's coming across to them. And the only thing that shows up on their financial reports is what matters to them, what affects them. It's their entity. It's their economy. They run it. It all revolves around them. They are the god of the economy. And, so in their world. So all of the reports reflect what's important to them. Now, they talk about, like I said, they talk about inflation rate. She avoids using the term profit. We want to make a 2% profit on this. This is what we had planned over time when we bought all of these residential mortgage-backed securities that people couldn't afford to carry. Now we want to unload them and allow other people who can to begin to carry all of these, and we want to make a 2% profit off of them. That's what she's saying. So this is why in Las Vegas that houses are sitting on the market or waiting to be put on the market. If you go to Zillow.com, you'll see, houses waiting. I think it's blue dots or whatever. Zillow's map will only show you 500 at a time. But if you look over in the right-hand column, it's somewhere around 29,000 houses or homes in the Las Vegas area that's waiting to be put on the market. And then when you go see what's already on the market, there's thousands on the market. But Zillow will only show 500 little dots on their map. You zoom in and more dots will begin to appear because you're shrinking the area that you're looking for, but Zillow will only show you 500 dots on their map at a time. Okay, so this creates another illusion. But the truth of the matter is, and I've seen it for years, we had a house down here on the corner that sat vacant. Nobody lived in it for 2.5 years. 2.5 years. And then all of a sudden, the bank put it on the market. Okay? It was sitting off of the market for years because they had other houses to get on the market and they didn't want to flood the market. They want cash investors to come in and buy them up, but they can't put too many on the market at one time because then it lowers the price of homes, and they want it to rise. So they want demand to be higher than the supply. And when you have a shitload of cash investors here in Vegas coming in wanting to spend their cash, you can put a lot of homes on the market, but you don't want to put too many because you want to create this demand. So my honey and I were looking for a home this year, and every home we looked at and we liked it, if we put a bid on it, there was a bidding war, and we weren't going to participate in that. We ended up getting this house at a great price. Well, we thought it was a great price, but when I go look at the value of it now on Zillow, it's $25,000 less than what we paid for it, and that was a month after we bought it. So what'll happen is you don't see the real value of the home until after you buy the home. But to us, the $25,000, that's not a big deal. So we overpaid a little bit. But our home is one of the highest priced homes in the neighborhood too. So we have to be careful about how much money we put into the house for improvements and stuff like that, because most of it, we're not going to get it back. And the people that owned this house previously paid $50,000 more than we paid for it, than we bought it for. So their price was $50,000 higher, plus they did a renovation while they were in the home, ripped out some walls and stuff like that and opened it up, added a garage, landscaping. They did a heck of a lot of improvements. They didn't get any of that money back. They lost $50,000 just on, the asking price alone. But they had another house in a different state and were happy to get rid of the house. So nobody is earning a profit off of homes except for the Federal Reserve, which created all of these risky mortgage-backed securities. And then when it all burst and people went to unload them, they bought them all up. I mean, perfect for pennies on the dollar. And then they bought so many of them that they're hoping to make $20 billion in profit. Ridiculous. So the people that talk about how, Janet Yellen doesn't know what she's talking about, she's full of shit, and they're raising interest rates. They're raising interest rates on the house, on the mortgages, because it's profitable for them. They are holding these securities. They want the 2% profit on top of all the other institutions making their cut of profit also. So for us, the portion of the house that we financed, our interest rate is only like 4%, guys. And we plan on paying the house off way earlier than what our loan term is. So I get it. And I think it was the first time today that it clicked with me. And this is why I like to listen to people I disagree with. I want to understand where they're coming from. And this is where she's coming from. She's telling you what's important to them. She's telling you what's on their balance sheet. She's telling you how much profit she wants to make by referring to the profit as inflation. This means profit for them. And here's the kicker of it all, okay? They sell the mortgage-backed securities to someone else at a 2% profit. And because they are rigging the system to create inflation, they're devaluing the dollar the person's using to buy it with. That's what they're doing. Well, after this person buys up these mortgage-backed securities from the Fed, inflation's going to continue to tick up in that industry 2%. So are the people going to make a profit? No, they're not going to make a profit, but the Federal Reserve is going to. Okay? So it's a win-win situation for them. It's amazing to me, the authority that they have and the power that they have over a nation's economy, let alone a global economy. Oh my God. What were these politicians thinking?
I just have two quick questions, but the first one, I'm very concerned about global debt. The Institute of International Finance recently reported that their estimate of total global debt is $217 trillion, or more than 300% of global GDP. Is that directionally, do you agree with that directionally?
So I haven't heard that number. That could be, I don't have that number at my
Well,
fingertips.
of that, $60 trillion is estimated to be sovereign debt. We have about 20 trillion of the 60 trillion. With that as background, the four large central banks also have their largest historic balance sheets, as you've said before. Japan, China, EU, and U.S. have collectively they're approaching $20 trillion now of balance sheet size. As you talk about reducing the size of the Fed's balance sheet, are you coordinating with these other central banks and looking at emerging market debt, particularly the $300 billion that's coming due by the end of 2018, relative to the size of your balance sheet here in the United States?
Well, I wouldn't say coordinate. We certainly consult with one another and try to make sure we meet regularly and discuss our policy approaches, make sure that other central banks understand how we're looking at our economies and policy options. So I think the major central banks understand the approach that others are taking, but trying to ask in an aggregate sense how much debt is outstanding is something that we're not doing.
What were they thinking? But it's neither here nor there, okay? Whether I agree or disagree with them, I know where they're coming from now. And so now I know what to expect. And another question that was asked to Janet Yellen was about the Wells Fargo fiasco, when they opened up all these fictitious accounts under customers' names specifically to charge their current customers fees. And Janet Yellen says, because this gentleman says nothing has happened to these board members that created the policy that caused this. And Yellen's like, yeah. Nothing, guys. Nothing. Because it doesn't affect their balance sheet.
On the letter I sent you last month, urging the Fed to remove the Wells Fargo board members who served during the bank's fake accounts scandal. And I appreciate the response you sent me earlier this week, which acknowledges that you have legal authority to remove these board members, and that confirms that you're willing to use that authority if it is warranted. And that's the question I want to get at today. How could removal of these board members not be warranted, given the facts that we already know? You know, the 2008 financial crisis showed that the big banks had completely inadequate risk management systems. And after the crash, the Fed established tough new rules for risk management. Those rules imposed higher risk management standards on bigger and more complex institutions, which means that Wells Fargo, by law, had to meet a very high standard. So let's lay this out. The Wells Fargo Board of Directors is ultimately responsible for risk management at the bank. Is that right, Chair Yellen?
That is a responsibility.
Good. So the board is responsible, and here's what they're responsible for under the Fed's own regulations. Making sure that there are, quote, processes and systems to integrate risk management with management goals and its compensation structure, and making sure there are, quote, processes and systems for ensuring effective and timely implementation of actions to address emerging risks. Now, Wells Fargo didn't come close to meeting those requirements. They established impossible cross-selling goals and set up a compensation structure that put enormous pressure on employees to open accounts, new accounts for existing customers. And despite a mountain of evidence that these incentives were leading to the creation of fake accounts, the board did nothing for years. The result was thousands of employees opening more than 2 million fake accounts. So can you explain to me how the Wells board can possibly have satisfied its obligations under the Fed's risk management regulations?
So I'm not prepared to discuss in detail what is confidential supervisory matter.
Okay? If you know what column they're looking at, all this $7 fees and who's doing what, they don't care. They don't care. Okay? And whether we agree with the principles that they practice or not, it's good for us to know them by their fruits. They're doing what benefits them. So then we know what to expect. So this stock that I'm watching, that opened up this morning at $12.99 is now sitting at $14.59 a share. Why? Because Janet Yellen spoke. Not because the company is doing anything different. Not because they are getting in better shape, because their actions last month made their price tick up. Let me look at my score here. It made their price tick up 8.75%. Okay? So Janet Yellen's voice is more powerful than anything that they could actually do to increase their profit margins.
On what we've already talked about, just kind of the moderation on the inflation language.
She gets it. She's aware of what's going on. She's at least as smart as I am. I mean, one of the things that amazes me on Wall Street, there are so many strategists who think they know more than the chair of the Federal Reserve. They don't. We don't. She's aware of the inflation risk. She's aware of the deflation risk. She's aware of the asset bubble risk. She's aware of all these things, and she's going to proceed cautiously. And when she sees those things, the odds of her being wrong, well, they're there, but the odds of her being wrong for long, which is really damaging, I don't think they are there.
In their company. She speaks, price goes up 13.5%. Insanity. But I accept the information. So I know in the future to look out and plan for when she plans on speaking and go to the Federal Reserve website and get a copy of the notes. Because if it's positive, if they're saying, okay, we are going to make a profit, my stock is going to react to it. Insanity, but it is what it is. And I don't want my money just sitting in a savings account paying 0.0002% interest. So over the past 2 months now, I've made a 10% profit off of the money that I've invested in the stock market, and it's fun. I like numbers. It's weird. I like watching the chart. I like watching the price go up and down. It's fun to me, and I can keep track of it while I'm priming my house, with 3 to 5 coats primer, because I'm trying to cover up a red-brown primer that was previously put under the paint. So, but anywho, it was a revelation to me, and I was just wondering if anybody else took the time to listen to her and understand where they're coming from, so that we can plan accordingly, not react. I was very tempted to buy into this, but I didn't know how high it was going to go or how low it was going to go, so I opted out today. Today I'm just watching, and I'm taking notes. But the day before yesterday, I made a real good profit off of this stock, and I sold. So I just continue to watch it. I believe that now the price is inflated, and it's going to come down. What goes up must come down. And I'll wait for it to come down in order to buy back in. So I hope you guys are having a good day, and I'll talk to you later.